Once upon a time, the government had a vast scrapyard in the middle of a desert. Concerned that someone might steal from it at night, Congress created a night watchman position. But then they wondered, how can the watchman do his job without instructions? So they formed a planning department, hiring one person to write instructions and another to conduct time studies. Next, Congress asked, how will we know if the watchman is doing his job properly? So they created a quality control department, hiring two people, one to conduct studies and the other to write reports. Then Congress wondered, how will these people get paid? So they created positions for a timekeeper and a payroll officer, hiring two people to fill those roles. Soon they realized, who will be accountable for all these people? So they created an administrative section, hiring three more, an administrative officer, an assistant administrative officer, and a legal secretary. After a year, Congress reviewed the operation and found it $18,000 over budget. They decided to cut costs and laid off the night watchman. Once upon a time, a king wanted to go fishing and asked the royal weather forecaster about the forecast. The forecaster assured him there was no chance of rain in the coming days. Confident in the forecast, the king went fishing with the queen. On the way, they encountered a farmer riding a donkey who warned, "Your Majesty, you should return to the palace at once. A huge rainstorm is coming." The king, trusting the advice of his well-paid and highly educated meteorologist, politely disagreed and continued on his way. Not long after, a torrential rain began, soaking the king and queen. Humiliated, the king returned to the palace, furious, and dismissed the weatherman. He then offered the position of royal forecaster to the farmer. The farmer explained, "I don't know anything about forecasting. I simply watch my donkey. If its ears droop, I know rain is coming." Impressed, the king hired the donkey on the spot, and thus began the long-standing tradition of hiring asses to occupy the highest positions in government. A man meets a beautiful woman and feeling quite attracted to her, he invites her to a movie. She responds, "Listen, if you're looking to sleep with me, there's no need for fancy dinners or movie nights. Just buy me a good Swiss Army knife." The man thinks for a moment and decides it's a practical offer, as he's not looking for anything long-term. So he buys her a genuine Victorinox knife. They go back to her place, and she opens a large chest in the closet, revealing it's already half filled with Swiss Army knives. She places his knife in the chest, then leads him to her bedroom for a passionate night together. The next morning, as they sit in the kitchen sipping tea, he asks, "Can I ask you something?" "What do you need so many knives for?" She smiles and explains, "Well, right now, I'm young, beautiful, and men are always chasing after me. But I know that won't last forever. One day I'll be older. My hair will turn gray, and I'll be the one searching for love. And do you know what a young man might be willing to do for a good Swiss Army knife?" A stockbroker walks past a kid selling lemonade. "Hey, mister, want to buy some lemonade?" the little girl calls out to him. The stockbroker, getting out of his shiny new BMW in his tailored suit, almost walks by but stops when he sees the sign. "Lemonade, $50. "Your sign's wrong, kid. I think you mean 50 cents, he says, shaking his head. "Nope, $50, mister," the girl replies. "I need the money for space camp." The stockbroker pauses, impressed by her hustle, but clearly thinks she's going about it the wrong way. "Look, sweetie, I get that you're trying to make money, but you have to charge what people are willing to pay. No one's going to pay $50 for a tiny cup of lemonade. What do you think is a fair price?" The girl beams. $50, mister." He sighs, shakes his head. "Okay, I'm gonna pass. You see? You can't make a profit when no one will pay your price. Do you have anything else for sale? Homemade brownies? 50 cents. The stockbroker winces. Okay. Look, I studied economics at Harvard and got my MBA from Wharton, so let me teach you something about business, okay? Now, each cup of lemonade probably costs you about 50 cents, including the cost of your stand. He pulls out $1. I'll pay you 10 times that because I want to teach you about markup. The girl shakes her head and smiles. No thanks, mister. $50, please? All right, I give up, the stockbroker says, frustrated. Here, take this $1. I'm going to buy 2 of your brownies, even though I know you're losing money on them. And I'm not buying any of your overpriced lemonade. I'm trying to teach you about business, but I guess this is the only way you'll learn. Okay, she says, taking the $1 and putting 10 brownies on a plate. Just to make his point, the stockbroker eats one of the brownies right in front of her. Immediately, he starts coughing and gagging uncontrollably. Oh, my God, what is this? Boy, what did you put in these? The little girl grins. It's my special recipe: eggs, flour, butter, cocoa, sawdust, and goat pellets. This is horrible. I have to get this taste out of my mouth, he exclaims. The girl pulls out a jar full of $50 bills, cocks her head to the side, and beams. You'll want some lemonade? I was sitting in the hospital waiting room while my wife was in labor. A nurse walked out and announced to the man next to me, Congratulations, sir. You're the father of twins. The man grinned and said, Well, isn't that something? I work for the Double Mint Chewing Gum Company. Then he followed the nurse to his wife's room. About an hour later, the same nurse came out and announced, Mr. Smith, congratulations, your wife just had triplets. Mr. Smith stood up laughing and said, Unbelievable. I work for the 3M Company. The guy sitting on my other side suddenly stood up and started heading for the door. Curious, I asked, Where are you going? He turned to me, looking pale, and said, I think I need some air. I work for 7-Up. I work for. A man was having lunch with his friend, passionately explaining his latest health kick. You know, he said, I've been studying healthy eating habits. After all, you are what you eat. The man's meal was a virtuous combination of salad with a light vinaigrette and unsweetened green tea, while his friend went all out with a fried chicken sandwich, fries loaded with salt, and a large soda. As they prepared to dig in, the man realized he'd forgotten a fork and went to grab one. While he was away, his friend decided to play a prank and dumped a heap of salt into the man's tea. When the man returned, he took a big sip and instantly gagged, spitting tea all over the table. What the hell did you do to my tea? He shouted, glaring at his friend. His friend smirked and replied, Didn't you say you are what you eat? The man frowned, shaking his head in exasperation. So, what? Now you're just a little, salty? There was an old man who lived by a beautiful forest. As the years went by, he began losing his hair. By the time he was on his deathbed, he was completely bald. Calling his children around him, he said, Look at me. My hair was once thick and magnificent, but now it's all gone. It can't be saved. But look outside at that forest. It's lush and full of life. One day it too will lose its beauty as the trees are cut down or die. He continued, Here's my wish. Every time a tree is lost, plant a new one in my memory. Teach your descendants to do the same. Let it be our family's duty to keep this forest thriving, just as we wish our family to thrive. His children honored his request. Each time a tree was felled, they planted another. Their children did the same, and so did the generations that followed. Thanks to their efforts, the forest remained vibrant and lush for centuries, all because of one man and his receding hairline. Jacob was sitting in the school hallway, visibly bored, when his teacher walked by. Trying to amuse himself, he called out, Hey, miss, Do you know how to put an elephant in the fridge? The teacher, intrigued, played along. No, how? Jacob grinned. You open the door and put it in. The teacher chuckled. Jacob wasn't done yet. Okay, how do you put a giraffe in the fridge? The teacher smirked, feeling clever. Oh, I know this one. You open the door and put it in, right? Jacob shook his head. Nope. First you take the elephant out. Then you put the giraffe in. The teacher laughed, but before she could leave, Jacob fired another question. All the animals are at the tiger's birthday party, except for one. Which one is it? The teacher paused to think. The tiger? Jacob grinned wider. No, the giraffe. It's still in the fridge. By now, the teacher was in stitches, but Jacob wasn't done. Okay, last one. If you needed to cross a river full of crocodiles, how would you do it? The teacher confidently replied. That's easy. I'd find a bridge. Jacob shook his head again. Nope. You'll just swim across. The crocodiles are all at the tiger's birthday party. The teacher burst into laughter and walked away, shaking her head at Jacob's clever antics. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson decided to go on a camping trip. After a hearty dinner, they settled down for the night and drifted off to sleep. A few hours later, Holmes woke up and nudged Watson. Watson, wake up. Look up at the sky and tell me what you see. Watson groggily opened his eyes, stared at the vast expanse of stars, and replied, I see millions of stars. And what does that tell you? Holmes pressed. Watson thought for a moment, then said, Astronomically, it tells me there are millions of galaxies and billions of potential planets. Astrologically, I observed that Saturn is in Leo. Theologically, it reminds me of how vast and powerful God is and how small and insignificant we are. Meteorologically, it suggests tomorrow will be a clear and beautiful day. Watson then turned to Holmes. What does it tell you, Holmes? Holmes sighed and said, Watson, you fool. Someone stole our tent. A chicken struts into a library, marches up to the desk, and squawks, Book, book, book! The librarian, amused, hands over a couple of novels and watches curiously as the chicken carries them out, crosses the street, waddles through a field, and disappears over the hill. The next day, the chicken is back. It drops the books on the desk and squawks, Book, 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 book. The librarian obliges with more books, but her curiosity grows. Again, the chicken disappears across the street, through the field, and over the hill. On the third day, the chicken returns, drops off the books, and this time squawks louder, Book, 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 book! Unable to contain her curiosity any longer, the librarian decides to follow. She trails the chicken across the street, through the field, and down the hill to a small pond. At the edge of the pond sits an enormous frog. The chicken waddles up, drops the books in front of the frog, and squawks, Book, book, book! The frog looks at the books, nudges them with a webbed foot, and croaks, Read it, read it, read it! A woman was waiting for a bus when she noticed a weight machine nearby. Curious, she dug out a dime, inserted it, and received a card that read, You weigh 126 pounds, and in 30 seconds you will pass gas. Sure enough, 30 seconds later, she let one slip. Shocked by the machine's accuracy, she inserted another dime. This time, the card read, You still weigh 126 pounds, and in 30 seconds, a handsome man will approach you. Right on cue, a gorgeous, muscular man appeared and began chatting her up. Thrilled by her good fortune, she decided to try the machine one more time. She fed it another dime, strutted confidently, and awaited the result. The final card popped out. You still weigh 126 pounds, and while you were farting and flirting, you missed your bus. On a sweltering afternoon, Scrooge, the miser, and his grandson, Tim, were trudging home from a party. Gramps, Tim whined, It's so hot and I'm tired. Can we take the bus? It's a long way home. Scrooge scoffed. The bus? That's $6. Walking is free. Tim sighed but kept quiet. Moments later, Scrooge spotted a taxi and flagged it down. How much to Springfield Avenue? He asked. $20, the driver replied. Too expensive. Scrooge waved the cab away. Tim, now completely exasperated, asked, Gramps, did you really think a taxi would cost less than the bus? Of course not, boy, Scrooge snapped. Then why flag it down? Think, Tim. First, we saved $6 by not taking the bus. Now we've saved $20 by not taking the taxi. Two bowling teams, one made up entirely of blondes and the other of brunettes, chartered a double-decker bus for a weekend tournament in London. The brunette team was on the bottom level, partying and having a blast. But after a while, one of the brunettes noticed something odd. Why don't we hear anything from the blondes upstairs? She wondered. Curious, she climbed the stairs to check on them. When she reached the top, she found all the blondes, frozen in fear, gripping their seats with white-knuckled hands, staring straight ahead at the road. What's going on up here? The brunette asked. We're having a great time downstairs. One of the blondes looked up at her and whimpered, Yeah, but you've got a driver. In a bustling city, a beautiful young woman was waiting for the bus at a crowded stop. She was dressed to impress, wearing a tight leather miniskirt with matching boots and jacket. When the bus arrived, she stepped forward but quickly realized her skirt was too tight to allow her leg to reach the first step. Embarrassed, she gave the driver a sheepish smile, reached behind, and unzipped her skirt just a little to create some slack. She tried again, but no luck. Flustered, she unzipped it a little more and attempted the step once more. Still, she couldn't manage it. Determined not to give up, she unzipped her skirt a third time, confident she'd finally loosened it enough. Before she could try again, a large Texan standing behind her grabbed her by the waist and easily lifted her onto the bus. Mortified, she spun around and yelled, How dare you touch me? I don't even know you. The Texan tipped his hat and drawled, Well, Mom, under normal circumstances, I'd agree with you. But after you unzipped my fly 3 times, I figured we were on pretty friendly terms. It was a dark, quiet night, and a man hurriedly walked into his bedroom, mistaking the woman lying on the bed for his wife. Without a second thought, he climbed into bed and got closer than he should have. The room was pitch black, and the woman didn't say a word, just let out a soft hum. Rachael, is that you? Feeling bold, the man whispered back, Shh, it's just me, your husband. But suddenly, the woman broke the silence, her voice hesitant yet clear. Excuse me, I'm not your wife. The man froze mid-motion, his confidence evaporating instantly. After an awkward pause, he muttered under his breath, Well, there's no turning back now. Halfway in, halfway gone. Walter and Linda, a middle-aged couple, were blessed with 2 beautiful daughters. Despite their happiness, they always longed for a boy. After some time, they decided to try for another child, and before long, Linda found out she was pregnant again. 9 months later, they were overjoyed to welcome a baby boy into the world. Walter, who was at work when Linda was rushed to the hospital, hurried to get there as quickly as possible. But when he saw his son for the first time, he was taken aback. The baby didn't resemble his daughters at all. His nose was larger, his ears bigger, and his chin was completely different. Linda, how is this possible? He exclaimed. He looks nothing like our girls. He doesn't even have the same chin. I can't believe I fathered this child. Linda blushed, and Walter gave her a suspicious look. Have you been fooling around behind my back? He asked, his voice rising. Be honest. "No, Walter, I haven't," she replied, still blushing. "Not this time." Two women, Margie and Sharon, are having coffee together, talking about their love lives. "I don't know what to do," sighs Margie. "I'm too shy to ask for it, and he never initiates." Sharon grins and says, "Well, I have a surefire way to get things started with my husband." "Oh, really?" Margie leans in. "Tell me!" Sharon smirks and says, "I just sit next to him, slowly slide my hand down his pants and say, 'My, aren't you cold in there? Looks like you could use some heating up.' Works every time." Margie laughs. "That sounds great. I'll try it." A few days later, the two meet up again, and Margie looks absolutely miserable. Sharon, shocked, asks, "What happened? Why do you look so upset?" Margie sighs. "You almost got me divorced." "What? How?" Sharon exclaims. "I tried what you said," Margie explains. "I slid my hand down his pants and asked why they were so warm instead of cold like yours." Sharon laughs. "And?" Margie grumbles. "He said, 'That's because I'm wearing long johns, not your husband's pants.'" A burglar breaks into a home holding the husband and wife at gunpoint. He ties them both to chairs and begins robbing the house. After taking everything of value, the burglar is ready to leave, but the husband suddenly yells, "Please untie her! Please, just let her go!" The burglar shakes his head. "No, I can't untie either of you. I need to make sure the authorities aren't alerted too soon." The husband continues to plead, "Please, just let her go. I'll do anything." The burglar pauses, then responds, "I'm sorry, but I can't leave any loose ends. The neighbors will probably notice the lights are still on and check in with you soon anyway." The man, desperate, cries out, "Please, just untie her. She won't call the cops, I promise." The burglar, moved by the man's desperation, says, "Wow, you must really love your wife to beg me like this." The man, now frantic, replies, "Not really. It's just that she'll be home in 15 minutes. When I was a kid, I took an aptitude test with a psychiatrist. He placed a pitchfork, a wrench, and a hammer on the desk and said to the nurse, "If he picks the pitchfork, he'll be a farmer. If he picks the wrench, he'll be a mechanic. If he picks the hammer, he'll be a carpenter." I grabbed the nurse. The town was so dull that one day the tide went out and never came back. Every day she drives the car out and returns with the same question. Guess who I ran into? A piano tuner worked at a nightclub for 5 hours, but only charged £3. The manager said, "Is that all?" "How come it took 5 hours and you only charged £3? The tuner replied, "What? A dog bit a chunk out of my leg the other day." A friend asked, "Did you put anything on it?" I said, "No, he liked it as it was." My wife is really into do-it-yourself. Every time I ask her to fix something, she says, "Oh, do it yourself." My wife does all the decorating herself, but overdoes it. The other day, I opened the fridge, and there was a lampshade on the light bulb. I swam the English Channel once, but lots of people have swum the channel. Lengthwise. She's always smiling. She's the only girl I know whose teeth are sunburnt. A leopard went to see a psychiatrist. He said, "Every time I look at my wife, I see spots before my eyes." The psychiatrist replied, "That's natural." The leopard said, "But doctor, she's a zebra." A drunk was brought to the police station. He pounded his fist on the counter and demanded, "I want to know why I've been arrested." The sergeant said, "You've been brought in for drinking." The drunk said, "Oh, that's fine then. Let's get started. I always sit at the back of a plane. It's much safer. You never hear of a plane backing into a mountain." A husband was addicted to smoking and drinking. One day, his wife got fed up and told him, "If you keep smoking, all your intestines will fall out." The husband laughed it off and continued his habits. Determined to prove her point, the wife secretly bought some intestines, stuffed them into his underwear while he was sleeping, and waited. Soon he woke up, screamed in horror, and fell silent for the next half hour. After a while, he came downstairs, sweating heavily. "What happened?" his wife asked, concerned. He replied, "You were right. My intestines did fall out, but don't worry, after a lot of work, I finally managed to push them back in." A husband and wife were quarreling on the way to a restaurant. Just before they arrived, the wife said, "You're very lucky to have me. No other normal woman would want you." The frustrated husband decided to prove her wrong by trying to find women who would be interested in him during dinner. When the hostess greeted them, she smiled endlessly at the husband, laughed at his jokes, and even offered to take his coat. The husband, feeling triumphant, turned to his wife and said, "See, she's interested in me." His wife, unimpressed, replied, "Don't get too excited. It's just her job. She's married too." "How do you know?" the husband asked. "Because I saw a ring on her finger," she replied. Later, the husband went to the bathroom, and on his way back, he accidentally bumped into a woman sitting alone at a nearby table. He apologized, bought her a drink, and chatted with her for a few moments before returning to his wife. "Just so you know," the husband said proudly, "she invited me to sit down for a drink with her." His wife, unfazed, replied, "Don't get too excited. She's probably half blind." "How do you know?" the husband asked. "Because I saw her come in with a walking stick." A little while later, the waitress came to take their order. It was clear she was flirting with the husband as she gazed at him. He looked at his wife smugly and said, "See, she's interested in me." The wife rolled her eyes. "Hey, don't be an idiot. She has COVID." "How do you know?" the husband asked, bewildered. "Because," she said, "if she's interested in you, she must have no sense of taste." A man goes to a marriage counselor alone. The counselor, looking puzzled, says, "This is quite unusual. Marriage counseling usually works better when both partners are involved. Since you've already paid for the session, I suppose we can role play. I'll pretend to be your wife." The man stiffens, clearly uncomfortable. The counselor, playing along, says, "Honey, are you not happy in our marriage?" The man responds, "I can't complain about that." The counselor continues, "Is it the intimacy?" The man replies, I can't complain about that either." "Then is it the way I treat you?" asked the counselor. "Nope, definitely can't complain about that." Frustrated, the counselor breaks character. "I don't think this is going anywhere without your wife present. Why don't you bring her next time?" The man hesitates, then says, "No, that won't work at all. It has to be just you and me, no role-playing." "Why is that?" asks the counselor. The man grins. "Because to you, I can complain." It was the 1930s, and a wealthy banker and his wife were dining at an elegant restaurant when a stunning young woman approached their table, gave the husband a big kiss, and said, "I'll see you later," before walking away. The wife, glaring at him, demanded, "Who was that?" The husband, looking sheepish, replied, "Oh, she's just my mistress." The wife, fuming, said, "Well, that's the last straw. I've had enough. I want a divorce." The husband, trying to calm her down, responded, "I understand, but remember, if we get a divorce, there'll be no more shopping trips to Paris, no more wintering in Barbados, no more summers in Tuscany, no more expensive cars, and no more yacht club. The decision is yours." Just then, a mutual friend walked in with a beautiful woman on his arm. "Who's that woman with Jim?" asked the wife. "That's his mistress," the husband replied. The wife huffed, "Ours is prettier." One day, a wife called out to her husband from the kitchen, "Can you bring me the jar of sugar?" A few minutes later, the husband shouted back, "I can't find it." Annoyed, the wife stormed into the kitchen and said, "I knew it. You're always so blind you can never find anything, can you?" Then, with a smug look, she held up the jar and added, "That's why I already grabbed it myself." A blond man had been staring at his beautiful fiancée for quite some time. Feeling shy, the girl blushed and said, "What are you looking at? Why are you staring at me like that?" The blond man, deep in thought, smiled and replied, "I was just thinking, if you were my mom, I'd be just as beautiful as you."